in a couple weeks with a more in-depth presentation when we have a more stable connection. So this is COVID-19. We're doing the best we can with what we have. Let me briefly introduce Michael because he's who you want to hear from, not me. I'm very pleased to have met him fairly recently. Michael Diallo is a litigator. He's an attorney. The reason I emphasize litigator is when I'm looking for legal advice, it's a different story when you're talking to someone who actually practices litigation and they firsthand see and advocate in the courtroom and have that personal experience of how a situation plays out in court. See, there we go. It lost me. It's also close to my heart that Michael's been proactive in getting information out to landlords and investors like yourself who might be in trouble right now or facing uncertainty with tenants not paying their rent and wanting to know what are your options. So Michael, thank you so much for joining me. I'm gonna just show. Michael, are you okay? Is the bandwidth work?
Okay.
Can you hear me?
We can't hear you, Susanna, but thank you for setting this up today. It's a pleasure to be working with you on this presentation and to talk a little bit about some of the options that landlords and investors and other people who might be in a difficult situation due to this COVID economic environment. Like Susanna said, I am a real estate attorney. My office is at Broad and Locust in Center City, Philadelphia, and I help property owners such as yourself, if you're watching today, about issues involving all kinds of disputes involving a property. And sometimes disputes are very contentious. They might go to court, and sometimes it just involves a negotiation between two parties. But if you have rights to a property and that rights could be enforced through the court system, that's the type of work that I do for my clients. Now, obviously, the current economic environment has had a lot of really tough impacts on people who are involved with properties as an investor or even just as a professional that is holding a property like a home that might be held out for rent to someone. And it's created a lot of uncertainties. People are scared. People are uncertain about what's going to happen in the future. And you can imagine someone who holds a portfolio of properties right now, a landlord that has been ordinarily collecting rental income from the tenants in his properties. He or she thought it was a very stable source of income. And now, due to the situation we have with the virus, it's uncertain about whether or not those rental incomes will come in and whether, if the properties are mortgaged, whether or not the landlord is going to be able to make payments to the lender who will have some mortgage against the property. So there's a lot of talk about different options for people who are struggling, whether or not there's going to be a forbearance or forgiveness of debt, whether mortgage foreclosures will be postponed for some period of time, and also questions about what are the landlord's rights regarding their tenants. The tenants are struggling to make payments. Those tenants' payments are important to the landlord to make payments to the lenders. So there's a lot of really difficult situations right now. And Susanna brought me on this call today to talk a little bit about what some of your options are and some pitfalls to avoid when you are dealing with situations where people can't pay. If a tenant can't pay a landlord, and if a landlord can't pay a lender, what are the options and what are some of the most important things to avoid in terms of pitfalls? So I want to give you a sneak preview today of what those things are, and we can talk a little bit more in depth about those options on another call. But just to give you a bird's eye view, the first thing before we talk about any of the three main options is always this: always, always, always know what it is you're signing. If you're entering into some type of forbearance with a lender, you have to know what the terms of that forbearance are. So there's different terms. If you enter into the forbearance, it may mean that the debt is postponed for a few months, maybe 3 months, 6 months, 12 months. But you have to ask questions and you have to know very carefully what your responsibilities are in that agreement. Because if you don't read it, you might become surprised that after 3 months or whatever the term is, there's something like a balloon payment that might be due at the end of the term of that forbearance. In other words, if your mortgage is $2,000 a month and you receive a 6-month forbearance, that would mean that the conclusion of that 6-month forbearance, you would have a $12,000 payment that's due. Now, that may be helpful to you, and maybe it won't be, depending on your circumstance. But what is important is that you understand the implications of that forbearance, and you make the best preparations that you can with with whatever terms for the forbearance you're able to get. And the reason why that's so important is if you don't really get the knowledge that you need to know that there's going to be a balloon payment due, you're going to have a situation where the lender will initiate a foreclosure action or start the foreclosure process if you can't make that balloon payment. There's other pitfalls too, and we'll talk about those on the next strategy call that we'll do in a couple of weeks. But the key thing is to make sure that you're looking at what you're signing and understand the terms of the forbearance. Now, some of the lenders investors who are on the call today, or the tenants might ask, so what are my options then? If I'm a landlord, I'm holding properties, and I want to make sure that I can protect myself as best as possible during this time and avoid a foreclosure, what are my options? And today I'm going to tell you what those three options are, and then we'll talk a little bit more about what those different strategies for those three options are in our next call. So the first is a loan modification, which is called a modification because it's an application to your lender to modify the terms of your loan in some way. A modification is when you're asking the lender that due to a hardship, will you please make a change to my payment plan in some way to help accommodate me during this time. That's the first. It's something that is an application. It's not a legal right in many circumstances. Sometimes it is, especially for federal loans. But in many situations, you're asking a lender to make an accommodation to you. So that's the first. A second is a short sale. A short sale is when you sell your property, usually to an investor or some other person, for less than what the mortgage balance is on your property. So let's just take an example. Let's say your property is worth $450,000, but you have a mortgage against the property for $500,000. Ordinarily, you can't sell the property for $450,000 and make the mortgage balance go away. But with a short sale, a lender might agree to do that. And there are certain circumstances where if the property is worth less than the mortgage balance, the lender has an incentive to work with you. And the incentive is that they will allow you to sell the property to an investor, and the property will then be liquidated and sold, and your mortgage could potentially be eliminated, at least the balance of that mortgage, through the short sale. So that's number two. And the third, and the one that has, I think, the least attention on it, and probably should have a lot more attention, is defending a mortgage foreclosure action. So let's suppose that a short sale is not available to you for some reason. You applied for a modification and the modification was denied, or you couldn't make the balloon payment. The lender could initiate a foreclosure action not long after that. And there's a huge misconception that people have about foreclosures. People think that foreclosures oftentimes are like an administrative process, but it's not. It's a legal case like any other, where a lender files a lawsuit, the lawsuit is served, And then there is a long period of time between when it's filed and when a sheriff's sale actually happens. That is like the middle part of the case where litigators like myself would ordinarily prosecute or defend a case. And that really presents a lot of opportunities for people to defend a mortgage foreclosure action. They don't realize that there's any grounds for contesting it. They don't know what the defenses are. And a lot of times legal rights are lost and money and time are lost that could have been made beneficial for the property owner if they only would have defended the mortgage foreclosure action. So, for my clients who are facing that, sometimes defending the mortgage foreclosure action is a great idea. It might make sense financially for them, and it might have a lot of benefits that they didn't realize as part of defending the legal case. I'll give you a quick tip, just one brief thing about defending a mortgage foreclosure you might not have known. Especially for residential mortgages, there are certain disclosures that a lender has to make to the property owner, and certain notices that have to be made. And if the lender fails to do that before initiating the foreclosure action, it can create a counterclaim that the property owner might have back against the lender. And a counterclaim would be great if you can find a violation of the law somewhere that a lender didn't abide by. It might create a settlement opportunity for you where the lender might ordinarily demand the maximum amount, but if you have a counterclaim against them, you might be able to resolve the mortgage foreclosure action in a very favorable way that might not have been available if you had not asserted all of your defenses. So, just in sum, those are the three options. The main options are modifications, defending the mortgage foreclosure action, and short sales. And if you have a situation where you're really struggling with these kind of environments where you can't make a payment and you're struggling to make the things that you need to make to the lender in order to resolve the situation, look into what your options are. Find out if one of those options are best for you. And if you need help with that process, contact Susanna or myself, and we'll be happy to talk it over with you and see how we might be able to help.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Thank you so much, Michael. You were so gracious. And I will post below a link to your April newsletter where you have very clearly highlighted the highlights of those options. And thank you again for your patience. Anyone, if you have questions and you want to think about it, I will let you know for the next more in-depth session with Michael. Please have your questions ready. I'll also include information on how to access this studio, so to speak, to welcome you. And we look forward to more in-depth information. It is a time when it can be very, very confusing, and I so appreciate you coming out today from your home office. And all of you, I appreciate your patience with this mobile technology, and I apologize for the glitch in the Wi-Fi. So please stay safe, and we look forward to learning more from Michael. I'll let you know the date and let us know your questions, okay?
All right, thank you, Susanna. Take care.
Thank you.